I'd like you to welcome this morning someone very special. His name is Mario, and he is the person who has worked very hard to have us here together in this day. And if you can please welcome today Mario Russell.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? My children say I speak too loudly, so I just want to make sure I'm not offending adolescent sensibilities as I might at home. So you're okay? Good. Well, I'll be brief, which tends to mean that I won't, but I promise I'll do my best. But I do want to just say a few words of welcome. And thank you, Niurka, for your welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome you on behalf of the Center for Migration Studies here at St. John's University. Grateful to President Shanley, Father Aidan Rooney, the Ozanam scholars, and all the staff and students here, which is a home of sorts for me, where I taught law for 13 years as an adjunct faculty, and from where I first began my work in immigration as a Vincentian Service Corps volunteer in 1987, though actually maybe you think it was 1887 from the color of my hair. The question of migration, immigration, or emigration is at the center of our social awareness today. You really can't miss it. Here and abroad, just about really everywhere in the world. Not more than 36 hours ago, migration, but more importantly, really, I think, migrants, people, families, individuals, human beings, were placed in a painfully grotesque, dehumanizing frame by our ex-President Trump. And I would say, once again, it is a dehumanization that is at its worst. Dehumanization that I would say isn't, in fact, just gratuitous, because it has an objective to divide and to create fear and to make us afraid of human beings. Over the past 20 or more years, we as a nation have allowed, if not indulged, the language of fear, of difference, of anxiety, to change our perception and understanding of migrants as people and as human beings. They're now poison, invaders, criminals, terrorists, security threats. Which comes first? Question. Language or dehumanization? It's hard to know because they really grow in a perfect symbiosis. But over the past 20 years or more also, and in fact, I would say over the past 125 or more years, something else has been happening. And that hasn't stopped. Agencies, people, providers, thinkers, case managers, teachers, lawyers, pastors, students, friends, neighbors, like you in this room, and many, many more, have been working to bring forward what the Holy Spirit always calls us towards: wisdom, action, and hope. Ignoring fear, overcoming difference, challenging doubt, marching forward with conviction, the unshakable conviction that in encounter with people, with human beings, migrants, yes, you feel real, and the world is healed. Today's convening, a church at the borders, best practices, promises, and aspirations for the integration of migrants in New York. It's just about that, encounter. It's meant to raise, discuss, and perhaps answer questions about how do we as a community of faith best, or at least better, articulate a vision of encounter with migrants. How do we connect encounter with transformation? What are we doing? And how are we doing this work in our various spaces and places, schools, universities, legal services, case management, parishes, accompaniment, resettlement, and more. We have a very high standard to meet if we consider that New York is not a, but the example to the world and to history for how to welcome and integrate migrants. So as New Yorkers, are we doing our part in this today, especially with these twin challenges? One, the arrival of over 200,000 asylum seekers over the past 2 years, and two, the flourishing of vitriol and easy targeting in ways not seen since the early 1900s. Where do we focus our attention and care? Is it work, jobs, legal, home, school, health, faith, community? Where are the broken spaces and the wounds in need of healing? Can we learn from each other today in the spirit of a faith-based sensibility that is rooted in a long tradition of Catholic social teaching? Pope Francis is pretty concrete about this. He says that this spirit of transformation is achieved with 4 basic premises with regard to migrants: welcome, defend, promote, and integrate. So the metaphor I envision really, in many ways, is tied to a concrete image of a home. Imagine opening your home to a migrant. Comes in, you feed him, her, a space to sleep. We protect from what? Possible incursions, possible deportation, possible removal. We promote into society, finding work, finding sustenance, support. And finally, we integrate, which in Pope Francis' visions means, how do we learn? How do we learn and absorb and receive the gifts of migration and of the migrant? So here we are today, to each other, to speak and to learn, to know that in integration, in the learning with and from each other, in our migrant neighbors, we are healed and transformed. As one migrant with whom I worked and whom I defended in a 10-year-long case, and who was detained for 2 of those 10 years, when I met him once in detention to talk about the final strategies for his case, I said to him, because we were very much in a losing position, Indra, what are you going to do if this doesn't work out? His family was back in Queens, 4 children and a wife. And he said, Mario, I don't know, but what I do know is that God is with me. A few additional words of thanks before I introduce to you President Shanley. Thank you to the fabulous advisory board who helped design and develop this day. Thanks to the speakers and moderators who've donated their time and will and knowledge and passion today. Thanks to Professor Kristen Heyer, Deputy Mayor Ann Williams-Isom, Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio, each of whom will ground us in some reflection, teaching, and inspiration today. Thanks to the staff, Julie, Matt, Wayne, and Kevin at Center for Migration Studies, and thanks to Jeff Corrigan, who's done so much to coordinate and bring this day forward. And thanks especially to His Excellency Bishop Brennan, who will start the day where it should always find its beginning, in reflection and prayer. And now introduce to you the Reverend Brian Shanley, Professor of Philosophy, Theology, past President of Providence College, and the President of St. John's University. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. It's my pleasure to welcome you to St. John's, but I also want to thank you for the work that you do. There's really nothing more important, I think, for the church today, especially in this country, than the work that you are doing. And it's fitting that we welcome you here because we were founded to educate immigrants. The first bishop of Brooklyn, Bishop Laughlin, realized that there was a great need in the new Diocese of Brooklyn for Catholic education. And he invited the Congregation of the Mission, the Vincentians, to found St. John's, beginning in Brooklyn, and then we migrated to Queens. But we were founded to educate then mainly German and Irish immigrants. And the thing that attracted me to come to St. John's was the extraordinary fidelity to that founding mission that St. John's has maintained for over 150 years. We are still a school that educates immigrants. Over 40% of our students are Pell eligible, and most of those students are also first-generation students. If you get a chance today, walk around our campus and see what we look like. We are the UN here at St. John's. And this fall, I'm proud to say, we also welcome 2 Palestinian students to our community. We have welcomed Ukrainian students to our community. We welcome all people to come to St. John's. The original intention of the bishop and the Congregation of the Mission was obviously to propagate the faith. That's one of the primary mission of a Catholic school. But it's also an engine of social mobility. A college education is the means of lifting people up and giving them an opportunity to be successful in our country. And universities are places where the church does its thinking about the most important topics. And immigration is certainly one of those. As was mentioned, it's become a political football. And it's really sad that it has come this way. And we who believe in Jesus are haunted by the words, "I was a stranger and you welcomed me." It's not a political issue for us, it's a moral issue, and it's a gospel imperative. And the thinking that you will do today to help us to deal with this crisis, with this opportunity for America to recover what it has been and should be always, a welcoming place for all peoples. So I wish God's blessing upon you and your work, and it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce the successor of Bishop Laughlin, Bishop Brennan, who is also a St. John's alum. Welcome, Bishop Brennan.
Thank you, Father Shanley. Thank you for the kind introduction and welcome, but thank you also for welcoming all of us to St. John's. It is important that we're here. I'm incredibly proud as a native son. So I'm kind of a native son of the general area, the island, but certainly an alum of St. John's. It is a source of great pride that we're working together. You in the Catholic Migration Society, and the services rather, and the Bishops' Conference, St. John's University, and the church here in Brooklyn and Queens. It's really nice to see the work that's being done, but also the partnership, the fact that we are in this together. One of the reasons why this is so important for us in Brooklyn and Queens is, I often say, the whole world lives in Brooklyn and Queens. And, you know, I know that some of you might say, well, you know, that's true in other cities, and it is. And it is, even in other boroughs in this great city of New York. But you see, here in Brooklyn and Queens, the whole world lives here, but we live very closely together. We're about 5 million people stuffed in 180 square miles. And we don't have Spanish-speaking parishes or Chinese-speaking parishes or Italian parishes. We have parishes that have all of those realities. And there's something that happens really at the granular level where people are coming together, living together, worshiping together. Yeah, of course, we kind of bump into each other every once in a while. This is the human condition. But there is something deeper. And that something deeper is what you are expressing by your being here today, and what you're expressing by the work that you're doing. One of the things that I'm incredibly proud of, again, in Brooklyn and Queens, is the way that our parishes have led in some of the growing needs in the last 2+ years. Anticipating long before it was a news story, long before even it was a political football, long before it was on the radar of any of the community leaders. Our parishes, our pastors were meeting people who were coming to the church and then saying, well, where's everybody else? And what do we need to do? It was a moment that inspired me, a moment that really challenged our Catholic charities and our good working institutions. This is who we are. It's not about me, it's the people on the ground who are making incredible, incredible things happen. So let's pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Brothers and sisters, we turn to the Lord at the beginning of this day, asking God's help and blessing on the day itself, on all of us. We pray that the work and the inspiration of the Holy Spirit may guide our deliberations and our work in the mouths of those who will present and in the ears of those who will hear, and in the feet that will move forth from here in loving service of God and neighbor. We ask God's blessing on all of us in the day-to-day work that we do. And in a particular way, we pray for the migrants among us in our society, in our communities, and right here in this room. I do so offering the prayer from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops for the prayer for migrant families. Good and gracious God, we thank you for the gift of families. We are grateful for all the joy and love they bring into our lives. And we ask that you provide special protection for all families, particularly those who face hardships as they move in search of a better life. Show mercy to those who travel in danger. Lead them to a place of safety and peace. Comfort those who are alone and afraid because their families have been torn apart by violence and injustice. As we reflect upon the difficult journey that the Holy Family faced as refugees in Egypt, help us to remember the suffering of all migrant families. Through the intercession of Mary, our mother, and Saint Joseph, the worker, her spouse, we pray that all migrants may be reunited with their loved ones and find the meaningful work they seek. Open our hearts so that we may provide hospitality for all who come in search of refuge. Give us the courage to welcome every stranger as Christ in our midst. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, God, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I join with Bishop DiMarzio, who was my predecessor, but who was incredibly active in the Center for Migration Studies and the works that that is being done, who's been a real leader nationally, not just here in Brooklyn and Queens, with Bishop Vitold, with all of the church in Brooklyn, Queens. You are very, very welcome. God bless.
Well, thank you very much, Bishop Brennan. Thank you very much, Father Shanley. Again, welcome. So, without further ado, as they say, let me reintroduce Niurka, a friend, colleague, parishioner, and one of the examples of what it means for parish life and work to develop into parish mission and mandate to serve, protect, promote, and integrate migrants. I've met Niurka in Chicago, where she had done some great work out there. So it's a pleasure to have her today facilitating us today, quite literally facilitating, making today easier for us. So Niurka, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll just make one comment that's incredibly prosaic and dull, but it's up here that you can see how to get into the Wi-Fi. You may need to get closer to it to read. I know that there are two bathrooms, one for men and one for women, out just to the left. I think that's it about sort of administrative details. Niurka, thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Just a few reminders. As he said, the bathroom is to the left. The agenda is not in your packet, but if you can see to my left and to my right, there's the agenda for the day. You can take a picture and then you have it with you, or I would like to make you walk because I'm a health educator. So a few steps a day goes a long way. I'd like to also introduce Mario once again because he has a lot to say. And because he's a good friend. And you should know that Mario is the executive director of the Center for Migration Studies of New York. It's known as CMS. An attorney and professor with over 25 years of experience in migration policy and law. Before joining CMS, Mario Russell was the director for the Immigrant and Refugee Services Division of Catholic Charities in New York. He conducted litigation in the Federal District and Appeals Courts and managed the Asylum Defense Clinic at St. John's University School of Law, where he teaches immigration and comparative refugee law. He graduated from the University of Maryland School of Law. Please welcome once again, Mario Russell.
So thank you, and I had decided to do my comments before since we changed the order a little bit, so thank you everybody. And I'm going to hand it off so we have efficiency of time. Niurka will get us started on our first panel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so since we are running a few minutes late, not too late, but usually it happens, we're going to start our first panel. And our first panel will take us through a journey. This journey is about migration in the New York City region, the needs and challenges and realities. This panel will be moderated by Dr. Leo Guardado. Dr. Guardado is an assistant professor of theology at Fordham University. And to tell you a little bit about Dr. Leo Guardado, he is from Chalatenango, El Salvador. He migrated with his mother to Los Angeles, California, where he grew up until he was 9. He attended St. Mary's College in the Bay Area of California. He holds a master's degree in theological studies from the University of Notre Dame. And after graduation, he worked in Tucson, Arizona, providing humanitarian and pastoral services. Let's welcome Leo to the podium, please.
Well, good morning. We're all awake already? There's delicious coffee out there. I don't know what brand you use, but I rather like it. So we have 4 panelists, and I'll introduce them briefly in a bit. We have one purpose this morning, as was already said, and that is to get a sense of the realities and the challenges before us in the New York City region. We'll come back to those realities and those challenges throughout the day from other perspectives. But we'll have a conversation to get us started, focused primarily, I said, on New York. So our 4 panelists will share really from their insights and the wisdom that they've gained from their day-to-day experience working with immigrant communities in the city and from their own lived experience as immigrants as well. And so let me introduce them briefly, and they can come up. Lucia Goyen. Lucia is the Day Labor Program Director for Catholic Charities Community Services of the Archdiocese of New York. She's a graduate of NYU Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. And you can see the fuller bio in the pamphlets there, in the papers. We also have Saul Bonifacio. Saul is a student here at St. John's University, and I believe is a seminarian with the Vincentians. And he's also from El Salvador, my home country. We have John Gonzalez, Director of Parish and Community Relations for Catholic Charities in the Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens. And John received his Doctor of Ministry degree in Latino Studies from the place where I work, Fordham University. So, welcome, John. And last, we have Dorian Rojas. Dorian, welcome. Dorian is the Director of Programs for Immigrant ARC, which is a community of legal advocates and an immigration law training and policy institute. And Dorian is the St. John's University School of Law graduate, so you're right at home, so welcome. And I'll just say before we get started with questions that together, in one sense, they are a field hospital, to use that image of Pope Francis. You know, they are responding to the gifts and the challenges of those recent arrivals and the not so recent arrivals who challenge each one of us to make of ourselves neighbors to them, which is not a given. For a conversation, we have about 45 minutes to engage in a conversation. I will begin by asking them some kind of leading questions, but I would encourage other panelists as well, if there's a point that was said, to jump in, to ask a clarifying question, to add something so that there's a more dynamic kind of process here. After the 45 minutes, then we will stop. I will turn to you for 15 minutes. I invite you to discuss in your tables what resonated with you, what you found most interesting, and to generate questions. After those 15 minutes, then we will return for about 20-25 minutes. We'll see how we're doing with time for Q&A, essentially, more directed Q&A. So that'll be the structure, and then I'm done, and you are free for the next part of the day. So, to get us started, let me begin with Lucia. Can you share with us, before maybe we start with the question, essentially we're looking at 4 spheres: a labor sphere, an educational kind of sphere and experience, the parish and diocesan sphere, and then the legal sphere. So these are kind of like the 4 major areas we'll be dealing with. So as we start with labor, can you share with us the workplace challenges of migrants and refugees in New York City, Lucia? Thank you.
Sure. Hi, my name is Lucia Guayne. I'm Director of Day Labor Programs at Catholic Charities. And so the workplace challenges for recent arrivals and really all immigrants is the same from, you know, the many, many decades of immigrants arriving here, right? This is just one part of the long-term wave and the groups of people that we've seen coming. And so the main challenges that people face are just trying to find work that won't be exploitative, right? Some sort of type of work that many of them are going to be undocumented, continue to be undocumented, or at least be undocumented for a period of time. So it's not as easy as getting here and finding yourself and establishing that path. It's figuring out how to connect to cash jobs, different work, a lot in construction, obviously, that we see, a lot of food industry, things like that, that are day to day, which is what day laborers do, right? Trying to find that work that unfortunately is not stable and causes a lot of vulnerabilities where you have wage theft issues, you have exploitation issues, you have a whole gamut of labor violations that can occur, and try to make sure that people are connected to people that won't be exploiting them, but also how to protect themselves, right, and how to find that work. So we work mainly with people who are waiting at the paradas, the stops, so at gas stations, Home Depot. There's a huge issue happening nationally with Home Depot, trying to kick day laborers off, for instance. So that's a recent issue that we've been seeing over the past 2 years, where they've been waiting for decades at Home Depot stops for people for work, and now having to confront these issues too, of where they even wait for work and trying to find decent, safe spaces to do so. So that's obviously the main piece. The other piece is just understanding how the labor market works here and what types of jobs are available. Many people are unaware of the different steps. They don't have digital skills. They don't speak English. Many of the new arrivals obviously are they're not stable in their housing. They don't know where they're going to be tomorrow. They don't know where to register their kids for school. So all of that, of course, how are you going to be able to find a job if you don't know where you're going to be living tomorrow, where you need to send your kids? So all of these things are part of a comprehensive look to see how to stabilize workers and families. And a main, an issue that we're seeing that is both, I guess, kind of a double-edged sword is there's a lot of attention on work permits, and many of new arrivals being able to access work permits earlier than other arrivals, which is great news, but also not the end. A lot of funders, a lot of government officials, a lot of other officials may see, well, let's push everyone to get a work permit, problem solved. But that's just one piece of a much larger pie of trying to understand what is needed to get work and to retain and work, right? So things I've mentioned about not even understanding how to go to an interview. Maybe they were part of the informal labor market in their home country, or they owned a business. They don't know how it works here of, how to set up a resume, how to go in for a job, how to apply online, any of these steps. So while work permit is amazing and can open up a lot of doors, if they don't know how to access those open doors, they're not going to stay at those jobs. They're not going to get those jobs. And so it's really supporting people from beginning to end, from when they are undocumented and may stay that way, to if they are able to get work permits, how to connect them to the more traditional labor force and support them further, that maybe many workforce development programs may not focus on, right? Or maybe need more hand-holding the traditional workforce development programs. So those are some of the overall challenges that we're seeing with the recent population and just populations that we've worked with for many, many years.
Great, thank you. Can you expand on what some of the geographical or the labor areas are where migrants and refugees are most needed?
Sure. So across what Catholic Charities, our two-day labor programs are in the South Bronx and in Yonkers. So obviously in New York City, there's a huge construction industry, which needs a lot of labor. So that's a big industry that people are in. There's a lot of people in food service, a lot of domestic work, right? Nannies, house cleaners, those types of things, those types of industries, and all over the city. And then in Westchester, we see a lot, closer to the city in Lower Hudson and near Yonkers, New Rochelle, Mamaroneck, all those areas. But of course, throughout Westchester and the Lower Hudson Valley, there are these pockets of paradas and stops where people are waiting for work for all of these industries in all of these areas. The further up, north and west you go, maybe it's more agriculture, those pieces. But it tends to run in the same kind of high labor need, low wage markets that exist, is where the most needs are, and more industrial areas. And then in the rural areas, as I mentioned, the agricultural industry.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned at the beginning the need to find work that is not exploitative. Can you go more in depth into what are the modes that exploitation shows up on the day-to-day world?
Yeah, so I touched on it briefly. One is obviously wage theft. So a lot of people saying, okay, I'll pay you X amount first, not paying a decent wage. So not, people not knowing there's a minimum wage, and so they just need to feed their families. So that sounds better than any wage I've gotten, and I'll take it. So they don't know that they're even exploited at the very beginning. Then once that happens, they don't have a formal contract, so they need to know to take notes, maybe take a picture of the license plate, information about the contractor. These are all things we train workers on how to try to protect themselves, so they can protect themselves afterwards if at the end of the day the contractor or the owner, homeowner, or the employer says, I don't like the work you did, or I'm only going to pay you for 3 hours because you took a 3-hour break, or anything that they can make up. They don't have something legal to go forth and say, well, you promised X, Y, and Z for this many hours, and this is how many hours of work. They don't even have a time card, right? It's just what they're writing down. So there's those issues where people trying to find ways not to pay the full wage or pay them at all, pay them with a bounced check. Maybe they don't have a bank account, so they can't even cash the check. So all of these elements of even just getting paid is one of the huge pieces. Then other pieces, obviously, because they're vulnerable, not knowing their rights and saying, well, I know you're undocumented, so I can call the police if you don't do what I tell you. Or if you try to come after me, I'll call ICE, or I'll call the police and make things more difficult for you. Or I'll tell other contractors not to hire you. So now I'm going to kind of blacklist you. So just fear of coming forward when there is that exploitation. And then, not giving people breaks, not allowing them, lunchtime, not giving them the proper equipment that they may need and that they're supposed to provide, and just letting people work in conditions that are inappropriate, right? Not having the correct work boots, and then working on a construction site, or not being trained and making them do very dangerous things that could lead to injuries or deaths, which is why New York City passed a law in 2017 to protect workers and make sure they had 40 hours of site safety training, which is something we do at our site as well. So those types of things, from beginning to end. And then, after the fact, making sure that they, if they call back for repeat work, that they are able to find someone that they can trust that will be able to pay them and won't put them in those exploitative conditions. But we also have seen folks that get injured on the job and they say, don't say it was the job, go to the hospital and say something else happened to you, so they don't have to dip into their workers' compensation and say, we'll cover your bills. And then they disappear when all of a sudden the bill arrives. So now you had to make a workers' compensation claim when you went into the hospital and were told by your boss, don't say it happened on the job site. So things like that may have, repercussions after the fact at work.
Most of the people that you work with would be recent arrivals or people who have been here for a long time?
It's a mix. So in both of our sites, in the Bronx one, we see it's a lot more transitory. Obviously, New York City, a lot more people coming and going. But in both sites, we have worked with people who've been working here for decades. And because they don't have access to any type of legal immigration relief, they are undocumented. So they still have to be day laborers. They still have to figure out where to find work on a regular basis. Maybe some of them want to open up their own companies and trying to go that route and all that it takes to do that. And so not all of them are able to do so. So we work with both established communities as well as new arrivals who are just arriving and have been told, go get your training and go to this stop, and this is where work is available.
I'll have another follow-up question then. You said who have been told to go to the stop. So other community members tell them to go to the stops, or the business community. So what role does the business community play here?
Yeah, often when people come, the first thing they'll do, obviously, they'll go into stores, or they'll say, hey, I'm looking for a job. I see you have a help wanted. And obviously, in those more formal, they'll ask, well, where's your work permit? Where's your social? So like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. Or what's your taxpayer number? What? I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, go to a nonprofit. They can help you. So a lot of people hear about Catholic Charities, other nonprofits in the area, and then we kind of explain all the steps. And then, obviously, for them searching for other types of work, they hear, okay, well, this pays well, and they don't ask questions about your work permit, which is things I've mentioned like the construction industry or restaurants or things like that. So trying to figure out where to get in the door there and just hearing from other people, oh, I've heard this stop, they've been picking up a lot of people, or I've heard here that there is a lot of work, or everyone that arrives first starts here, get your start there. And so that's where we see a lot of people for the first time.
So maybe the last question for me, and for the sake of time here. This is New York and immigration, so the whole world, I think it was said, is right here. I forgot how many square miles, but the world is here. Mm-hmm. That's cultures that are merging in that bus stop. How do you work across the cultural differences? What insights and wisdom do you have to share with us about navigating just different ways of even thinking about time, about geographies, about the very nature of labor?
Yeah. So this is something that we're seeing acutely now, especially in the Bronx area, but everywhere. There's a lot of more recent arrivals from different African countries, such as Sierra Leone or other countries, Senegal, and who don't speak English. They speak Wolof, they speak French, they speak other languages that don't have, and they don't speak any English or Spanish, right? And that's the majority of what a lot of organizations are set up to serve. That's the majority of immigrants that we see and that we've served. But there is this larger group that needs that assistance. And so there's a lot at play there with cultural differences of different religions. For instance, at one of the Home Depots that we work with in the Bronx, a lot of the African population are Muslim, so they might be washing their feet before they do prayers. A worker who doesn't know that will say, why is this person washing their feet? That's disgusting. And look at them in a disgusted way while not understanding that this is a totally appropriate thing for them to be doing, but they don't know. They're not part of that culture. Or them finding work in different ways that's not the traditional way here, let's say. For instance, working together as a group and then sharing their income as a group, as opposed to one worker getting picked up, right, as a zero-sum game. So just different ways of relating and finding work together may be very different. And then, to be honest, obviously there's always the racial element of racism in home countries, racism here, and saying, oh, well, these people are different, and so they don't even speak this language, they don't know what they're doing. Let's leave them out and let's try to get it for ourselves and not kind of include them. So we have seen that. We have also seen, people opening their arms and saying, well, I was once a new arrival and I didn't know where to go. So people helped me. So let me explain to you why you shouldn't undercut our wages because it ends up helping us all. Or let's bring you into the fold and figure out how we can work together because we're both immigrants here. Or we're all getting kicked off Home Depot and not being allowed to use their bathroom. So we should work together on that issue rather than fight across, well, I got the job and you didn't. So there's those elements that could be a way to find positivity in organizing, but there can also be obviously the competition of saying, well, I have to feed my family, so I don't have time to have these larger conversations with you. I just need to find a job today.
Thank you, Lucia, for this insight into the labor sphere about the challenges and the gifts that are present here in our midst. We're going to shift now to Saúl, mi paisano salvadoreño. Bienvenido. Kind of shifting out here, in a way, to St. John's, to the world of universities, of educational institutions, and the role that they can play. And I'll just preface this by saying when I went to college, I was undocumented in California, and so it was really entering another world. So I'm really kind of eager to hear, Saúl, from you about your experience here in terms of migration at St. John's. And maybe to kind of get us started, can you just share your experience as a newcomer from El Salvador to New York City, what you're working towards, what you're kind of working on, and how this university community has played a role in welcoming you here?
Yeah. Good morning. Buenos días.
Buenos días.
I think she described the reality we live when we come to this country, right? When she was talking about all the situation, I remember myself, my first time when I came and I went to find a job. The owner.
Un poquito más duro, no te oye.
The owner.
Okay, quítalo si quieres.
Yeah. The owner asked me, "Do you have papers?" I say, "No." Okay, I'm gonna pay you cash, $9 per hour. And another thing that he told me is that in this country, you don't tell anyone how much you earn weekly, what religion do you belong, and what political party do you support. 3 questions that you don't answer, you don't talk to about. So that was my reality, that I started earning that amount of money at that time. And it was pretty difficult because, as she mentioned, I ignored a lot of things. I didn't know my rights. I didn't know what to do. Right? Different reality that is pretty difficult, and you don't have choices, so you must do something, right? Because there is no way. So that was my reality, and I think that one of the most difficult things that happened to us at that time is that you start losing your identity. You don't know who you are, because people start looking at you as something but not someone. And that's one of the most difficult reality. You are good, you are useful. You cannot do anything, you are nothing. And that's one of the most difficult reality that challenges us when we are here, because, yeah, it's just like you don't know what to do. I said, you don't know about the resources, about what people you must talk to about it. And I think that was my experience. She mentioned a lot of things that about documents, about money, about house, about the language, I'm learning English now. At that time, I didn't know anything at all. I say, hello, that's it, right? And it was another huge problem that I faced, but, little by little, that thing started changing, and now I can have a different perspective. That was 9 years ago. I came to this country in 2015. And then I think concerning the opportunity that the university gave me is that had changed a lot my perspective, and because I ignored a lot of things, people, leaders, people who had the power take advantage of our ignorance. We are ignorant about many things. That's why that people take advantage of us. But being in this university, I had the opportunity to know a lot of things. And one of the big achievement, the thing I'm grateful for being here is that I recover my identity. I mentioned in the beginning, one of the things we lose here is our identity. Where are you from? I'm from El Salvador. You are not American. Where are you from? I'm from Guatemala. You are not American. But then one thing that now I aware that fear of all, I, a beloved son of God. And that identity is the foundation of everything else. Now, I don't care about what people say about me. I, the beloved son of God, and that has changed my perspective, and I got that idea here, I learned that idea here, and I feel I experienced that idea here in this university. So I'm grateful for that. And now the other different knowledge I'm getting here now to help people. As he mentioned at the beginning, I am seminarian now, Vincentian seminarian. My purpose is to become a priest with the idea to help people, these kind of people we're talking about, right? And try to do our best. And I think that there is a lot of work to do, and that will be my purpose.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. I'm really struck by this sense of, when we come here, we lose our identity, all kinds of forces pulling us in all kinds of directions. But this institution, or really this community of learners, has helped you. And you said that it's by emphasizing that you are a beloved son of God. Yeah. Could you go deeper into how that has happened? How was that communicated to you in practice, in the everyday, in the way you were integrated into the community?
I think that the first thing is that this university offers us the opportunity to learn or know about God, right? Mm-hmm. That's the first step. You know about God. You know about God as a father. And that's the first step. That's knowledge first. But then also you have the opportunity to experience that knowledge, because it's different than knowledge we get in our brain, our mind, and then we move that knowledge to our mind, right? And I think that's the second thing. The university offers that knowledge. They speak about God. They teach about God. And then also you have the opportunity to experience that. And I think that has been the most important thing, or the way how I get that identity here, you know. There are many things that the university has different programs to achieve that goal, right? And that you can experience that idea, that identity, that you are a beloved son of God.
If you were president of this university, if you could redesign the whole university, knowing what you know about the loss of identity and the regaining of identity, that you're a son of God, you're a child of God, how would you restructure the university to open that up, in one sense, for the communities, for all those who will not make it to, whether it's St. John's or Fordham or any other Catholic institution?
I think now that the university is ready to die, you know. As a president, maybe I won't change anything now. But one important thing we have in our community is that we must interpret the signs of the time. That's something must be in our mind, right? Now we are trying, even here in these discussions, we are trying to interpret the signs of the time, the signs of the time. And I think that can be one of the things I will remember. I will try to keep always in my mind. If we discover now that we need something else, I will change that as a president, right? I will change. We need to change this. We need to change that. But now I think we are doing pretty well. We can see this diversity we have, the different activities the university is trying to perform to achieve that opportunity. And I think there is the other thing, that our personal response, right? Yeah, because, you know, there are the opportunity, but you don't want to respond. You don't want to be part of that experience. It's of course, you are free to don't do that. But I think that as a university, it's doing pretty well. You know, but again, it's the openness to change something when it's not working, when it's not giving us good fruits, positive fruits. Yeah.
You're a natural diplomat. That's very good. Maybe by way of last question before leaving the educational sphere, you may or may not have seen the debate the other night, but you know that the rhetoric of immigration is in the air. Your perspectives on that, coming here, you've been here, you said 9 years ago now, but immigration it's there in the air, in the water you drink and so forth. How does that land on you? How do you receive that?
I'm very skeptical to that things, you know. I remember the first time when I started knowing about American politics was in 2015, when I was in Stewart Detention Center in Georgia. It was the first time I watched Donald Trump debating, right? And they was discussing on the same things, right? The same thing they are saying now. I was in that detention, and they say, you will go back to your country. We will send you back to your country. And now I think it's the same. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, our leaders, most of the time, just want to take advantage of that situation. You know, the politicians here, they just take this situation to gain, to have more people trying to vote for them, right? Using the immigration topic as a way to attract people, right? But in reality, I think that it's pretty difficult. That's what I think. That's why we as Catholic community, as Christian community, it's a line there that divides us. And the line is that we must see people as someone. And that's the difference, right? Of course, we keep doing legal things, all that kind of. But if we forget that people are someone, people have dignity, we are doing nothing. And that's the point or the piece that these people, I mean, leaders, who talk about immigration, they forget about that piece. We are human, we have dignity, but for them it's just a way to get more power, to keep power, something like that.
Great. Gracias, Saúl, por compartir el conocimiento y la sabiduría. Gracias. Y vamos a regresar después cuando tengan preguntas. So, thank you. So, in the interest of time now, let us shift. One of the things that Saúl said toward the end is the Christian community is divided. Now we'll shift to maybe some of those formal structures of parishes, dioceses, to get insights and knowledge from John. And so, John, maybe by opening, can you share with us how Catholic Charities has prioritized service decisions that are affecting, like, the migrant and refugee families, especially over the past couple of years? Like, what are the primary needs or opportunities that are present for building community with migrants?
Can everybody hear me? Let me start with that. Does this work? Fantastic. Okay. So typically, we respond to the needs of community. The needs usually are very basic as far as ongoing, the need for food, the need for housing, the need for taking care of our senior population, which are growing in our Brooklyn Queens community. To that, we also rely a lot on our parishes. Our parishes see what happens on the ground. So having the pulse of the parishes for us is very important. They helped us tremendously when COVID happened, and we were able to see how to adapt services to the needs that our parishes were able to inform us. In the case of July 2022, we didn't need to do that. We did eventually knock on the door of the parishes, but we had our own crisis literally on the doors of 191 Geralman, our main offices of Catholic Charities, when the first buses of migrants came in with documents that suggested to them that this was their new home. So we went, borrowing from our friends at the Catholic Migration Services, which I know are here, triage. We really went into a triage mode of dealing with a crisis quite literally on our doorsteps. My colleague Josefa, who's with us today here, saw that very much in Queens. And again, through the help of parishes, we were able to start a response and really deal with the most crucial basic needs, which in this case was housing. And actually, one of the needs that I'm going to say, not the ones that come from the community that we serve, but the ones that I think is one of the most important. In fact, I believe my colleague here, Saul, has mentioned it, is clarity, clarification. You know, what's actually happening. Because we're finding out that these communities come to our doorsteps with a number of thoughts in their head. Well, they've been told. They've been told from their peers. They've been told from friends at the shelter. They've been told from smugglers. And so clarity becomes, I think, one of the greatest services that we end up actually giving. But in this case, you know, it was shelter system, housing, working, you know, eventually with the city. What is the needs that are expressed? We always thought, well, people need food, people need, you know, the basics, the basic human goods, as we call them in our Catholic social teaching. Their primary needs always ended up being, to this very moment, and so that's one of the things that hasn't changed, and that's why I had a meeting this summer with Lucia, because I needed to tap her wisdom on this one, is work. Mm-hmm. Work, because their needs not only includes the needs that you would think they need at this moment as individuals, but many of them have stories of needs that they still left behind, either on the border or back in their home country. And that's why for them, this was a priority. You know, housing will be nice. Mm-hmm. Thank God there's a, you know, a shelter. Or I had literally had some men that, well, you know, the weather's not bad. We're staying in a park. I need a job. Mm-hmm. You know, I need, you know, I have responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So those, you know, those became some of the real urgent needs, the referrals that we had to give, that we had to respond. But again, going back to clarity, the system. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest, this is a very difficult system to circumvent. We're probably going to hear a lot about that in a moment. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to go into that. But being able, with our friends again at Catholic Migration Services, to be able to have a process for, you know, being as clear as possible. And many times, I will be honest, we have to repeat that message over and over and over again to suggest that it is a long-term process and it is a difficult process. You know, you may have crossed the border, but your journey is not over right now. So I was so glad, Saul, you shared your story. You had the courage to share your story. I find that it's quite difficult for people to really share their story. I think there's a lot of scars that we encounter. I do highly recommend to our new arrivals, to our asylees, to please, and we give out journals, and that's one of the services we give, write your story, for two very important reasons. For your own benefit. Know who you are, know your identity, because Saul is telling, they will all lose it. You know? My own parents were migrants. They lost their story. I was the one who, as a historian, as a background, came back and said, we have to go over this. And it was only later my father was able to open up that he himself came undocumented. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they weren't saying that. But to write the story and to also prepare that story, because if this process is going to go through, you're going to need that. You're going to need that. So those are, some of the main initial services. Mm-hmm. But going back to a colleague of mine, Josefa, I think she came up with one of the big needs, getting them training. And obviously Lucia has already talked about this, but getting them training, because again, the priority of work is their priority. And we have to honor that. We have to honor that. So
that would be some of the key areas that you're focusing on now, as to say 2 years ago. Yes.
So if we're going towards the idea of adapting, like I said, we went through the phase of triage. This was an emergency. This was a crisis. We have to respond. These are, very core human needs. Now we have people who are here, who have found ways of struggling. Many of the folks we know have already left and gone to where opportunities are. They find that they have friends over in this state, over in that state. And so whatever training we can give, if it can translate into opportunity someplace else, God bless you. Mm-hmm. That's what we have. But yes, as we're reaching now a 2-year mark, coming up to the 3-year mark of this specific crisis, we're seeing that one of the two things that we need to adapt is with regards to helping, again, with the employability, opportunities that they're very much looking for. And the second piece, which we're having conversations about right now. We really like to do this, and we think this would be a really great place for the parishes to also relate with us, is relationships, encounters. So, there's a phase where you have 6 months to a year of, people respond with charity. There's a crisis, people will respond. Human spirit being what it is, people tend to get tired of it after a while. And, you hear negative statements, even at the level of the pews, even at the level of the parish. And one of the things that we encountered was them. Those people. What are they doing here? Especially when it came to NIMBY issues that we're dealing with in some areas of Brooklyn where, they need to find shelters. Well, why us? Why not over there? There was a lot of them, a lot of theys.
NIMBY being not in my backyard, right?
NIMBY being not in my backyard, yes. That we see that a lot. Well, to combat that, again, the need for relationship, the need for the encounter. So I think Mario and you had mentioned the field hospital. Well, what's the purpose of the metaphor of the field hospital? To be literally there for the wounded, but you're not dealing with theories, you're dealing with realities. So how to do that? Again, the parishes. God bless them. I know Father Dwayne's here, Father Doe is here. I mean, have the soup kitchens, and we, in collaboration, operate the soup kitchens, operate the pantries, operate case management in areas that are close to where the migrants are, okay? Operating then OSHA classes, worker rights sessions, where we again had, colleagues from different areas of our CCBQ departments. So, being able to do this, but also being creative. In the case, I'll raise the case of St. Mary's Star of the Sea in Brooklyn, where they were dealing with parishioners that were participating with NIMBY and using them, they, but not in the pronoun sense, in the, antagonistic sense. And so through the, creative genius of their pastor, and a need that we had for our folks was thrift stores, operating the need of clothing, especially for children, especially for families. So they operated, and what did that do? That brought members of their community them. So they didn't see them as, these dangerous men. It's an image. Let's be honest. But they saw them as families. They saw them as mothers with children, with needs, and children who ran, and children who act like children, which for me can be a little annoying. I'm sorry, but for the volunteer, God bless them, the older ladies, it warmed their hearts. It just warmed their hearts. For me, it's like, they cry, but that's what they do. But to see that and to respond to them and to create community, that's the pearl that we're hoping to do as we adapt, to the needs of the communities, how to integrate them, how to do what Pope Francis is asking us: welcome, integrate, promote, accompany this community.
Thank you, John. For the interest of time, we're going to move on, but I know there's a lot of parishioners here, people from various parishes, so there'll probably be a lot of questions for John after. And I love this image that you've left us with, the thrift store as the place and the time of encounter. So let us shift now to our last panelist, Dorian. So moving now to more of the legal sphere. And so as we think about the responses of New York City, especially in the past couple of years, what are the successes and the failures that you've seen?
Hi, everyone. I just want to say I'm very excited to be here. And like Saul, St. John's helped me fulfill my dream. This is where I fulfilled my dream, and it has to do with the community. And Professor Russell, who is now my colleague, but will always be Professor Russell for me, taught me law for the first time. So successes and failures, that's a big one. Yeah. So what can I say? I think it's a theme, right? This is a labor force. This is a story of people wanting to work. right? And we're not getting them that as quickly as they need. When you look at the city's response, is working in silos, right? So some people are working on the legal aspect, some people are working on the housing aspect, some people are working on the food and security aspect. Then there's the language access, and there is no integration, right? And I think that what happened is that we saw a surge too quickly and a demand that came in very high without an infrastructure in place. And instead of trying to create an infrastructure, we're just trying to get families in as quick as possible. So what is happening, for example, at the asylum centers across the city? People are being helped to apply for asylum, being helped to apply for temporary protected status. But I always, when I speak to our communities, right, that is not their main focus or what they need. They're mostly talking about needing food and to work so that they can, pay for things. But also, not everyone that travels here necessarily qualifies only for asylum. So at Immigrant Arc, we're a coalition of about 80 legal services organizations, and you have immigration attorneys there who are experts in the field for more than 20 years, working with immigrant families. And one of the things that you really have to do is get their story. So all of this is a theme, right? You really need to understand their story and everything that they went through, because some people are here because they were trafficked. Some people here are here because they are serious victims of some form of domestic violence, and not just, they have been here already and have been living in this cycle. Maybe they're married to a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident. So there are a lot of other things that these families can qualify for, but that if you're just going into a center that has a directive that they're only working on one thing, you're going to miss that. And that's a big deal, because depending on what you qualify for, you also qualify for other benefits across the city, right? So you may qualify for a housing voucher. You may qualify to be in a certain space to get mental health support. And I think that just leaves families behind, and it also changes. So immigration is very, very complex. When we talked about the system, it changes the posture of their cases. And that's important, because even if New York City wants to be a sanctuary city and wants to make changes to make it more comfortable for immigrant families to come here, we still have to deal with the state laws and their procedures, and immigration is federal. So we can make a lot of changes, but unless we have some form of connection and we're working with the federal government to make changes to laws that don't allow people to get work permits as quickly, we're going to be in the same space, right? We're going to be putting Band-Aids on things. We should be putting rubber bands and connecting everything. But we're going to be putting Band-Aids on things instead of creating long-term fixes. The other, situation that I personally see as a failure is the way that we are providing some services, right? I think we need to remember that we are providing services to a human being who went through trauma, and not all of the services are trauma informed. So because we're working in silos, we're asking people to go to all these different agencies with people that maybe look like them, maybe not, to retell their story over and over and over again to a stranger. And these are, families who, if I was in their situation, I wouldn't trust everyone. So I think this is very hard to think that we can provide a holistic service that's really helping them if we're not connecting everything: legal services, community-based organizations, the parishes, things of that sort. I think that a success is that, unfortunately, in immigration, in order for you to qualify for relief, there are very tight deadlines. So I will say that the city has been able to serve a massive amount of people in terms of making sure that they qualify for their legal relief before their deadline has passed. But we still have people who are going into, for example, an asylum center, getting their application out, but then they're in immigration court without an attorney to represent them, right? So they're having to defend their case on their own, and there are a lot of elements that they wouldn't know they need to prove. Right. So they, if you ask me, I traveled and I'm going in front of a judge, and I'm going to tell you my entire story. Right. But you have to understand that if I'm alone, there is another attorney there representing the government who is going to poke holes at your story. You need to be trained to answer that. Right. And to know when and how to disclose things. And I do think that a large amount of families, they just want help. So they're going to tell you everything, whether it's in their benefit or not.
Great. Wow. Thank you. That was a lot of moving parts. As you said, there's almost a lack of integration. So you're kind of giving us this bird's eye view. I want to focus on a few things. You mentioned like the role of narrative, like how to be able to kind of tell the stories, because that's part of the process. You mentioned mental health as well, and like the role of kind of traumatic experiences that are lived and how to not force people to relive those but all of these aspects funnel into the legal kind of horizon that they all have to fit under. As you identify these needs essentially, or these elements that perhaps we haven't focused enough on, can you identify like the trauma-informed kind of work? Can you go deeper into some of these successes? What does that look like done well here in New York?
Mm-hmm. I think what it looks like is integrating social workers into different legal spaces and also integrating them into the city response, right? In a way that people can maintain their privacy. So, for example, at one of the asylum centers, the way that people tell their stories is they're talking to people, but they're in cubicles. So there's people around them who can hear their story. They kind of can go into a room to talk about mental health, but then everybody sees you go into that room and everybody sees the condition in which you come out of. I don't think that even if you have a mental health staff there's still other trauma with people understanding your emotional being. I just think to me, that's something that's just very basic. If something makes me emotional, I probably will be embarrassed to cry in front of all of you. Maybe one or two of you, but not everyone. So I think we need to think about that and what does that mean long-term for people, right? And the consequences that people have. For example, if they're entering a program like a workforce program, are they ready? Right? Are they mentally prepared to have they dealt with some of the trauma and have they received the services that they need to show up the way they need to show up at a job and what is expected in our culture? I don't think we can say that.
Part of what I'm hearing, and maybe this is part of a broader movement, is continuing to integrate, thinking more about the educational institutions, the humanities, the social sciences into these broader legal frameworks, as we've kind of tended to keep them somewhat separate, and thus the lack of integration. Maybe, let me ask you another question. I believe that the state has set aside like $2.5 billion or so for migrant services. How do you think that should be spent?
So in the integration. So I think what's happening is that we are funding the way that I think the state is looking at a lot of things is numbers. So 100,000 people came in. We want to make sure 100,000 people apply for this. And I don't think that that's the way that you can think of things when people have so many needs, right? So you should fund so that there's integration so that we can have a holistic approach to working with families. So that means that whether you're a lawyer, a social worker, working in the labor force, you're a priest, we all have different talents and different things that we bring, right? So you should be funding something where we can work together to play on our strengths to help families holistically.
Great. Maybe we'll leave it at that for now. What we'd like to do, and they're not done, and there's going to be a second part, but what we'd like to do now, so thank you, Doreen. What we'd like to do now is shift to you for the next 15 minutes. And essentially, in your tables, have a discussion, even if it's just two of you there, have a discussion of what resonated with you and what you've heard from these four panelists, what was most interesting to you, and what questions begin to arise. And then we will come back for another 20 minutes or so for Q&A. So enjoy, get to know each other, introduce yourselves. Thank you. So welcome back. We have about 20 minutes to engage in a question and answer period. So we want to finish promptly by 11:10. So we'll go till about 11:07 or so with questions, and then we'll finish off the panel. So if you have a question that you would like to ask any of our panelists or all of our panelists, please raise your hands. And we have Jorge Palacios here. Thank you, Jorge, who will be bringing the microphone to you. Okay, I see a kind of hand here. Yeah, okay, great.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Marianne. I work with NYC, supporting their contracts and compliance for the asylum seeker program. I'm thinking about some of the factors that I'm anticipating for like climate shifts, right? We got cold weather.
Oh, closer to the mouth.
We have winter coming, right? We have winter coming, and I'm thinking about the people who are outside, outside the parishes, outside, housing, just waiting for something, waiting for work, waiting for food, right? Some of them have beds at night, some, not all. So I want to know in the past, right, perhaps when you came, or in the evolution of these programs that you've seen, what can we do for this coming winter for people who do not have cots?
Great, thank you.
Sure, I'll start it off. I mean, one of the things that we do, in fact, we had the conversation, I think it was on Monday, preparing for this. I mean, well, I mean, some things are crisis, but some things like weather, yes, we know what's happening, we know what's coming, and like you pointed out, this is we've had experience in this. So, we want to make sure that we're building up our supply of coats, winter stuff, all that, blankets. We can't always produce miracles. I mean, we can't, have. We have the person that comes in to either 191 Jerome or St. Pius Church in Queens, and if this is a situation, we want to make sure that we can give them whatever we can give them. So for that to happen, again, we rely on our wonderful donors, parishes, for heavy coats and blankets and all those necessities. Advocacy, especially when, luckily, we try to tell people, think ahead of time, as you come over. So if you have a notice, let's work with the notice. Don't wait until you're out. Let's see what we can do. So we advocate. We've called the shelter system. My experience is that they can respond. Okay, sometimes when they know somebody's looking after, they tend to, it's like that way even if for those of you who are in the healthcare industry. I mean, or a nursing home industry, you have somebody who's neglected, they respond less. You have an organization that's assisting, they will respond. So that's the ways we prepare ourselves for doing that. Now the other thing besides weather that we're also having conversations is, come November, what's going to be the political reality that they're going to face? So all that requires us to deal with realities as they emerge. Some of them obviously like weather, others we're kind of already starting to judge what our political response is going to have to be.
I have a radical idea, if you want to explore it. So I know in some places like in Colorado, the mayor has worked with some cities and private citizens and people that own Airbnbs and things of that sort to see what incentives they would have to host people, whether it's community members. So it could be a private family, maybe your basement's open, depending on where you live in the city. But also if you kind of you have space and you rent. Yeah, I will send that to you. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I was just going to add, in terms of, it's related to the question, not exactly about housing, but in terms of work. And so this is an ongoing issue because with day laborers, it's seasonal, right? And so in the winter, it's always less work. So what do we do? How do we prepare them ahead of time to try to enter industries? That doesn't matter what the climate is, that they'll find work. Or for instance, last year we did a successful pilot that we'll probably do again this year, where we bought snow shovels and they just took them out free of charge from us. And they were able to now have a tool that they need to go shovel snow. So at least they got money that day that they wouldn't have gotten just for the simple fact they didn't have a snow shovel. So trying to give them those kinds of tools along with coats, boots, things that they can't afford right now. So at least trying to make that as easy as possible and trying to support them in the times where we know they're going to get behind on rent. We know they're not going to be able to get food. We know they're not going to be able to pay electric bill. What can we connect them to resources? Free food, food pantries, those kinds of things. If we have direct assistance, can we assist them with some of those bills so that they could at least have some support and so that they could turn to the things where they need to figure out how to stay in their housing or how to do other things that connect them to those types of resources.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for that question. Do we have another question?
I'm Andrea Bartoli with the community of Sant'Egidio. I've been very touched by what the Burkinabe community is doing in New York. For the first time, we have several thousand coming from Burkina Faso. And I was wondering if the panelists know many good examples of immigrants having a story of suffering coming here, but coming because they want to come, coming because this is better than what they have over there, and start being capable of lending money to one another, helping finding work. I was so surprised that there is now a significant community in Nebraska of Burkinabe, because they discovered that because in Nebraska don't have population, they have a lot of people not caring for the elderly, they are paying people to be home to take care of the Nebraska elderly. So now people from Burkina Faso, from New York, are moving to Nebraska. And this is America, right? This is a freedom of finding your own way. So I'm curious if the four speakers have examples of similar success story of refugees that come here suffering. They definitely see that this is better than there, but actually can help each other and make it as our ancestors did. So I'm curious if you can share some good stories.
Well, in our day labor program, we have a group in Yonkers called Obreros Unidos, Workers United of Yonkers. It's been around for a long time. And when the new arrivals came, they were the first to open up their arms and explain to them, okay, this is how things work. They, for instance, when a lot of new arrivals were kind of, I won't say the word I really want to say, placed in a hotel in Yonkers and placed in different hotels. Really, they were dumped. To be honest, placed in those hotels without really good connections or resources and kind of being lost. They went out and prepared a meal for them. We did Thanksgiving events. We did Christmas events. So we went out and said, you're here now. You're part of the community. Welcome. We've been here for decades. Let us welcome you here. So we have that connectivity and that ongoing connectivity with new arrivals. Although, yeah, there were tensions, as I mentioned earlier, about jobs, zero-sum game, if you're undercutting my wage, but there was a lot of that welcoming. So that's the success stories we see often of people who've been here for decades, taking them by the hand and saying, here, let me show you how this works. This is how to survive in New York City. This is how to survive in Yonkers and Westchester. This is what you really need to know. And we have some workers who've been here for a while, open up their own companies, right? So then they're able to hire workers, right? That's what we're looking to build up the entrepreneurship, so they can hire workers that are new and be able to have them as part of their companies as contractors, subcontractors, not worrying about that element, right, about work permits or those types of things. And then we've done some successful workshops that we're going to continue to do where workers themselves who are experts in sheetrock, painting, things like that, teach other workers how to do that. And so they learn these skills that no one's, all those certifications are great, scaffolding, OSHA, all that, but there's not like a painting school where someone can learn now how to be a good house painter or a good, sheetrock. So this is someone that they're learning at our centers from workers themselves who've been doing this for years, and shows that their expertise, they're paying that forward with the expertise that they have. So those are some of the success stories we've seen in people kind of embracing new arrivals and bringing them into the fold.
Okay. Back there.
Hi, my name is Carmen Maquilon, and I'm the Director of Immigrant and Refugee Services for Catholic Charities of Long Island. And this question is mostly for Saul, but the others can join in. And it's about kind of mental health. And it's when a refugee comes, or those that come not out of their choosing, but because they feel that this is the safe place, you are forced into an integration. Sometimes some people choose the assimilation, but then it comes back to haunt them a few years later. It could be that they, 5, 10, 20 years later, they are walking down the street and they see the flag of their country where they originally from, or they see a pupusa or an arepa, and then all of these feelings come back to flood you. It's like a post-traumatic stress in another level. So I just wanted to see if any of you can talk to that, and how have you seen this reflected in some of the refugees or people that you are working with?
Yeah, I think it's evident that after this process, there are a lot of things that will be in our mind forever. Forever, that's a fact. And I think that we learn how to work with that in our community or in our Christian faith. There is the opportunity to go through a process of healing, right? And of course, there is a lot of people who now cannot have a good life because of their past. They still remember, they are still living in their past. And that's a lot. Now, I went to, during this summer, I went to Long Island. And that surprised me that a lot of people on the street, young people, drinking, living there. And what's the problem? They are like they have wounds, they have problems, they are suffering because the idea they had when they were in their country to come here was completely different. Now in this reality, they choose to have that kind of life. So there are a lot of things concerning that problem. But then also there is an opportunity, a way to change that life. And that's our mission. That's in this case, my mission, right? To help these people to find, or at least to start a process of healing. They mention a lot about our own stories, right? We cannot change our life. We cannot change our perspective, how we feel, how we confront, how we live in this world if we don't heal our wounds, our past, our all the things, negative things that have happened to us, right? So yeah, there is a lot of cases, but also there is a lot of hope. I joined 3 months ago a group of people. There is a topic there is something at church which is called The Theology of the Body, written by John Paul II. And they have a program that helps you to heal your wounds. That's where I got the idea that to recover your identity helps you to heal your wounds. So there are programs, there are things to do, but the idea is to share with that. Be like an evangelizer concerning that things and help people in every way as possible. We can. Yeah.
I just want to make a quick note. That I echo everything that Sal said. The other thing I would say, I think it's important to connect people to professionals that work with refugees and asylum seekers, because this happens a lot. I think it happens more often than what people like to talk about. And I'll give a quick example. Especially when we're working with children. I remember there was a child that we recommended for mental health services who was talking to their counselor about feeling like resentment towards their parents for having to leave them when they fled. And the person who did not typically work with refugees, the answer was like, well, why do you feel that way if your parents came here, now they gave you a better life, and now you're here in a better life? So now on top of everything that they're feeling and trying to resolve, they now also feel guilt for feeling that way towards their parents. So I just think it's very important. I think that's very, very true. And I think we just have to do our research and make sure that we're connecting people who understand what it's like to have to flee, leave your home, and just have all these, feelings that you need to resolve.
Thank you both. Very insightful. I think there's another question on the same table.
Yes. Good morning. I'm going to try to synthesize kind of what we discussed at the table in my question. So, one, as a born and raised in New York, I am not surprised by the response that New York City gave in response to the crisis. I mean, 23 years ago, we saw how New Yorkers came together, and that's what we do, right? We take care of each other. But there is a certain amount of fatigue, right, that sets in. And one of the things that many people on the panel talked about was this idea of identity and how that plays out. And And one of the things that at least I've observed and we discussed is how that identity for, particularly for migrants, gets reduced to the idea of, well, you're a laborer, you're here to work. To what extent can you contribute to help us, right? And the call to integrate means creating spaces for migrants and recognizing their own dignity to be whoever they want to be, right? And to dream and to, right, live full lives. But to get to that point requires a lot of assistance. And at a certain point, people get tired, right? Whether it's an organization, whether it's a parish, whether it's government, at a certain point, that fatigue of charity kind of sets in. So how do we combat that? How do we push past that fatigue that sets in when people start to move beyond, this is how you can serve us, to no, this is who I want to be, right? So how do we help people transition to that without falling victim to the fatigue that typically sets in?
It's a great question, Richard. And I would say, you know, the 400-year New York history, even when we're still Dutch, I mean, that was always the case of immigrants. They built the city, you know, and they continue to build this city. And in many ways, they know this. They are open to be part of that because they have the needs, and what they're looking for is stability. One of the last questions that we had, yeah, one of the things that I see, that a lot of them are suffering. The great thing that we can offer, we don't always offer, is stability, security. Can their children go to school? I mean, things we take for granted, they do not, okay? But, you know, with regards to your question, Richard, I would say it comes back to encounter. And we are trying to be creative with this because it really comes to, comes to a point of having them have relationships, integrated relationships, where people, established Americans that you are, can give a perspective, can give options outside of the laborer paradigm. Sister Ancy, I think, is here from our Brooklyn community, and one of the things that we're talking about is something we're calling witnesses of mercy, which is, can we invite the people in the pews? Can we invite the parishioners, both the ones who are, you know, open to caring and the ones who may be reticent in calling them, you know, them, and the groups, the various Catholic groups. We have a lot of community. KFC, I'm a member of the KFC myself. You know, the Emmaus group, the Cursillos, all those wonderful Catholic groups that we have. Can we invite them to have a mentorship relationship, a one-on-one with these individuals, A, so that they can know them, and B, so that they can, besides what a caseworker does, which sometimes can be a little bureaucratic, they can offer a relationship where they can tell them, this is how to navigate this, or let me invite you to be part of a community so that you can heal in this way. So for me, that idea of being able to really, you know, create these pockets of relationship could be a way to get migrants to see that they're part of a community, and that they're not just the laborer that historically they tend to be.
Yeah, and part of, you know, what struck me about your question about the fatigue too is that I think it's a fatigue of the fact that we've been here before. So even when Dorian was speaking about it, we had no structure set up. I wanted to scream, why not? We were all here. How many years? We've all been working on this. We should have had a structure. It's, oh, this is new. We've never seen this before. Not true. How many years? So that has to change. If we keep doing it, of course we're going to get tired, right? What's the quote? If you try doing the same thing twice and expect a different result, that's the definition of crazy or something, or insanity. That's what we're doing. So that's where fatigue is coming from. We're just doing the same things and pretending that this is all new, and it's not. And so it's that frustration of, well, of course we're all going to be tired doing the same exact thing. And I think a big piece on what Sal said really struck me about identity. There's a good friend of mine who's an amazing lawyer, Hina Naveed, who's undocumented, she has DACA. She said, and she was a nurse, she has all these credentials. And I joked with her, like, wow, you never stop studying. And she said, well, what I feel when I came to this country, they don't want to give me free papers, I'm going to get all the papers they will legally give me. And so, you know, that's what we're looking for, getting people that recognition. You came from your home country and you're an amazing electrician, but just because you don't have an electrician permit here does not mean you don't know anything, or you can't teach that forward, or that that's not part of your identity, that you have those skills. So I think it's even just starting there of what do you know and what do you want to teach forward to show that you mean something, that your work here means something. You're not just one of the masses contributing to our economy. You are now propping up the next group and you are teaching that forward. So I think all of those elements of the identity and making sure that we're really honoring that first so that people can feel like they're moving forward, and changing the structures to actually make one that is responsive instead of doing the same thing that we know doesn't work.
You know, in my own experience about the fatigue, one of the things that must be clear in our mind is that this is a calling. For me, it's a calling, right? God's calling. And maybe sometimes I don't want to do something. I don't want anymore. But then I remember where is my call? Who is calling me? Who is giving me strength to continue to do things? And that piece is very important. We must discover if God or where God is calling us. And then when we respond to that call, maybe we cannot do anymore. But God will give us a strength to continue doing what He has calling to do. So that's a piece, important piece we must include in everything we do. For example, in our group, I have been joining different groups, young adults there in our parishes. And I share with them, don't forget your focus, don't forget your goals. Life is not about just working. Rest, have time for God, pray. That will make the difference in your life. Otherwise, you will be like with anxiety, you will be like different problems. But if you balance your life and you don't forget your focus, that is God who is giving you strength, then that will be the difference, that will change the things, how you see reality.
Great. Thank you, Saul. So we only have less than a minute, actually just 1 minute, but I want to honor that you were about to ask a question. So if you could, at the very least, state your question so that we can hear it, and perhaps there will be a moment where you can follow up with some of the presenters later.
Hi.
Hi.
Mary Lou Gonzalez, Catholic Charities, Archdiocese of Chicago.
Wow, welcome.
One of the questions that was asked of me at my table was what surprised me, because Catholic Charities Chicago has also been at the forefront, and you all know that. What surprised me was perhaps the minimal presence of accompaniment mentioned throughout. That surprised me. The other piece that surprised me was that parish work or parish ministry was not also really present. And it surprises me because you're in New York. And I have to say that, because many things begin here and everybody else kind of follows. And that part is what surprised me, and I'm wondering why. That's my question. Why?
Okay, great. Thank you. Very quick response. Very quick.
Well, yeah, I know. Well, all I can say is right now I'm surprised. So, I don't know how we could have done this without the parish community. All right, we have, the trained social workers and all that, and, to respond to the crisis. But I believe, and if I haven't mentioned it enough, hear it again. It is crucial, the relationship that we have with the local units, the parish community, to provide community, exactly that. I see Father Ed Mason's over here on my right, and I have an incriminating picture of him being the culture of encounter to many folks. I know Father Dwayne's there. He's another criminal, and that's been seen, relating very directly. So to have the parish communities, these bases, which are recognizable to our immigrant community. And that's one of the most amazing things. When Father Dwayne called us, it was exactly that. It's just St. Thomas Aquinas stands out. It's a church. You know it's not somebody's house. So Hispanic migrants go there. They recognize it. So, of course, what does Father Dwayne do? Contacts us. Let's do something. Let's respond. You know, they're coming to our doors. So, you know, we respond. B, we build community. And you guys have it. The parishes have it, again, with the various groupings and all that. So that seems to be the perfect partner, the perfect partnership to really build those relationships. So if I said it lightly, please forgive me for that. The parish communities are the essential partners for the way, at least, Catholic responds to the the issues like the migrant crisis.
Great. Well, the wonderful thing, thank you. The wonderful thing is that we have the rest of the day to accompany each other and to continue learning from each other and the expertise that's in the room. So I'd just like to thank the panelists before I hand it over to Niurka. Thank you for your questions. And Niurka, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. That was a wonderful panel. And I love that last question. But just a reminder that this afternoon, we do have a panel about parish and their involvement. And we do have members of Pastoral Migratoria. I'm sorry I have to say it because I'm a member. And we're going to be talking about what we do and how we do it. I just want to, before I let you go on a very short break, I want you to think about something before you leave. Are we using holistic approach when we come across an individual, when we come across a family? Is my agency, is my office, me, myself, thinking of everything that person needs? And am I thinking, am I doing enough? Is my agency doing enough? What else can I do? Maybe wonder, did Jesus do enough? And then answer to yourself, he went all the way to the cross.